Today, we're going to decode the hidden architecture of the business world, organization design. It's that invisible blueprint that dictates pretty much everything: who you report to, how your company innovates, and it's something most of us only really notice when it's suddenly changing again.
And let's be real, it feels like they are always reorganizing, right? If you've ever worked in a company of any size, you know exactly what I'm talking about. One minute you're in a functional team, the next you're in a matrix, and then suddenly, bam, it's all about agile squads.
This constant reshuffling can feel like total chaos, just this endless cycle of churn with new initiatives, new reporting lines, new priorities. But what if there's actually a method to all this madness?
So let's get into it. The field that tries to make sense of all this is called organization design. And what it is really is the combination of all the parts of a company, both the formal stuff, like org charts and processes, and the informal stuff, like culture, that all come together to determine how work actually gets done.
The great news is that decades of research have basically boiled all this complexity down into one powerful framework. So instead of being lost in a maze, we have a map with 4 distinct paths that leaders take when they're trying to design their companies.
And here they are, the 4 core approaches: configuration, control, channelization, and coordination.
Now, you should think of these less as sequential steps and more like 4 different lenses. Each one lets you see the company from a unique angle, each designed to solve a really fundamental problem.
Okay, so what's so cool about this slide is how it breaks down the logic behind each lens. Through the configuration lens, the company is basically a puzzle, and you're just trying to make all the pieces fit. The control lens sees it as a team of individuals who all need to be pointed in the same direction. Channelization views the company as a system for focusing people's attention. And finally, the coordination lens sees it as a big network of connected parts that have to work together smoothly.
So, let's go ahead and put on each of these glasses and see what the world looks like through them. Let's treat this as a practical toolkit you can use to understand any organization you come across. First up, we have configuration. Now, this is the classic approach. It's all about alignment, making sure the company's internal structure actually matches the demands of the outside world, its market, its technology, and its overall strategy. The main goal here is to achieve that perfect fit. But what the research shows is that in reality, managers spend most of their time just fixing misfits, when things are clearly broken. The ultimate challenge, though, is something called ambidexterity. This is basically designing a company that can execute perfectly on today's business while at the exact same time inventing tomorrow's. It's like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach, but for a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
All right, on to our second lens, control. So if configuration is all about the structure, the boxes and lines, control is all about the people inside them. The goal here is to get a bunch of individuals who all have their own motivations to pull together for the same team.
So how do you do that? Well, with a mix of controls. You've got the formal ones we all know and love, things like bonuses and performance targets. But you also have these super powerful informal controls, like peer pressure and a strong company culture. The big danger, though, is incentive gaming. That's when clever employees figure out how to hit their targets and get their bonus, even if it actually hurts the company in the long run.
Our third lens, channelization, is really fascinating because it's all about psychology. It says that a company's structure isn't just a chart, it's a machine for directing what people pay attention to.
So, the key takeaway here is that where you sit in an organization literally determines what you see. Hierarchy, for example, naturally creates biases. We tend to value ideas from senior leaders more. And this example on the slide just makes it crystal clear. A corporate manager looking at a whole portfolio of products is going to be much quicker to cut a failing one than the unit manager whose entire career is tied to it. They're looking at the exact same data, but their position in the structure channels their attention differently, which leads to a totally different decision.
And finally, we have the coordination lens. This approach sees the organization as this complex system of interdependent parts. And the key problem isn't just about aligning people, it's about managing the connections between them. This lens really gets at that classic dilemma. Should we be centralized or decentralized? So, when different teams' work is really tightly interwoven, a centralized authority can be absolutely essential to keep everything in sync. But if the goal is to tap into diverse external knowledge, a more decentralized structure almost always wins. The real challenge is figuring out how to integrate all that knowledge across silos without grinding everything to a halt.
So, where do researchers spend their attention? This chart is pretty revealing. A full 40% of recent studies focus on configuration, that quest for fit. It just shows you how dominant that way of thinking is in the field. Followed by coordination, control, and then finally, that more psychological lens, channelization.
Okay, now that we have the toolkit, let's look ahead. The world of work is changing incredibly fast, and these new trends are really pushing the boundaries of traditional organization design.
The big debate right now seems to be hierarchy versus these flat structures. Hierarchy is efficient, it's clear, but boy, can it be slow and bureaucratic. Flat organizations, on the other hand, promise autonomy and innovation, but they can seriously struggle with coordination. And what's really interesting is that even without formal titles, an informal shadow hierarchy almost always pops up anyway, where influence and real power just end up with a few key people.
And what about AI? I mean, we have to talk about it, right? The legendary researcher James March had this incredibly profound insight. He said, AI won't get rid of the need for organization design, it's going to completely transform it. We'll still have to design how workflows and how decisions get made. The difference is, the managers might be algorithms and the employees a mix of humans and AI. The fundamental design problem doesn't go away, it just gets a whole lot more interesting.
So, how can we actually use this map in our own work lives? Let's bring this all back down to earth and talk about the single most important takeaway from this entire framework.
Look, if you remember one thing from all this, let it be this: there is no silver bullet. There is no single best design that works for all situations. The goal isn't to find the perfect, permanent structure. The real skill is knowing which of these four lenses to look through when you're faced with a specific challenge. Is this a problem of fit? Is it a problem of incentives? Is it a problem of attention? Or is it a problem of coordination?
And that leads me to my final question for you. Think about your own company, or maybe a team you've worked on. Which of these four lenses, configuration, control, channelization, or coordination, best explains how it operates? Which lens explains your world? Answering that question for yourself is the very first step to mastering the art of organization design.